Excelsior, true believers! You are about to embark upon a journey, a trip to the 70s and 80s when mighty Marvel Comics ruled over all. The Defenders, Doctor Strange, the Champions, Deathlock, the Submariner, the Incredible Hulk, Killraven, the Son of Satan, the Macabre Man-Thing, and all your other Bronze Age favorites every week appearing on Defenders Dialogue. Now here are your guides, Christopher Golden and Brian Keene.
Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior indeed, Chris.
Brian, I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Today, we wrap up our coverage of Marvel's supervillain team-up. We're covering issues 16 and 17, and there is a lot to talk about here, Chris, a lot to unpack.
You know, certain members of our audience may be relieved when we move on to Man-Thing next week, particularly because we've mentioned many times, Brian, the fact that anybody who says that comics shouldn't be political and didn't used to be political need look no further than issues 16 and 17 of Supervillain Team Up, which literally could not be more political. I don't think you could find a story that is more obviously telling you who you should and shouldn't be rooting for in the world.
Very true. Issues 16 and 17 are a bit of departure from the rest of the series. There's a couple things listeners should be aware of. First of all, Doctor Doom and Namor, the Submariner, do not appear in these issues other than a brief flashback that we'll get to here in issue 16. The other thing to be aware of, issues 16 and 17 were actually published long after issue 15. I think there was like almost a year's delay between the publication of 15 and the publication of 16.
I didn't know that. And 15 was a reprint too.
Yep, exactly. So the reason I bring that up, we're gonna pick up with the Red Skull. Last week we left the Red Skull trapped on the moon where Doctor Doom had buried him under an avalanche. This week, we're going to find out how the Red Skull escaped that. But we're also going to see references to some other stuff going on throughout Marvel Comics that takes place around all this. The continuity can be tricky to follow unless you understand that issues 16 and 17 came out sometime after issue 15.
Yeah. And I also want to note, Brian, that I'm excited to say that issues 16 and 17 were written by Peter Gillis, who also was the writer on the deeply underappreciated final run of the Defenders.
Exactly. And if you want to hear our thoughts on that, season 1 and season 2 of Defenders Dialogue, just go back through the archives and listen. We covered all those in detail.
Yeah.
These two issue 16s illustrated by Carmine Infantino. I think I've said it on this show before. I understand as an adult why his work gets the acclaim that it does. As a kid, I was never a fan of his art. I knew him, of course, from Marvel's Star Wars and DC's The Flash. And Star Wars, I think, is the first thing I actually remember, noticing. And never a fan, but going back as an adult and rereading these, I can see why the acclaim is there.
Yeah, for sure. And also, it's the only issue Infantino and inker Bruce Patterson worked on. We'll get to the art team on issue 17 in a minute, but both are written by Peter Gillis. And we begin, Brian, with let's just say we begin with the pairing of the Red Skull and a Marvel supervillain called the Hate Monger.
That's right.
And let's only refer to him as the Hate Monger at this point.
Exactly. You read my mind, my friend.
Yeah.
And they, as friends do, they're enjoying a fine meal. But this splash page is horrific, particularly for a 1979 Marvel comic, because here are these two fascist, racist, and make no bones about it to our Comicsgate listeners out there, of which I don't think we have any, but just
I don't think we have one.
Yeah.
But by the way,
it's in his name. His name is the Hate Monger.
Yeah. His name is the Hate Monger. And the Hate Monger and the Red Skull are both Nazis.
Right.
Like when we say Nazis, we don't mean it in any metaphorical sense. We mean they are Nazis.
That's right.
And they are the worst of the worst. And they're celebrating their oppression and murder of people.
Right. And if you need any further illustration that they're the worst of the worst, Carmine Infantino gives it to you, because the floor beneath their dining table, and this is an opulent dining table. There are candles, there are, fine silverware and glasses, but the floor beneath them is see-through glass, and imprisoned beneath their dining table are all these slaves, these prisoners that they're keeping oppressed in chains.
Yeah. Who are raging at them from beneath the transparent floor of their romantic or bromantic candlelit dinner of Nazi murderers and oppressors. And the Skull is he's tired. He's going to go to bed early after a long day. But then he gets an early start, Brian. He gets up, he exercises, then he's sweaty, so he's just got a towel around his neck, and he takes off his jacket, so he's topless, but he's still the Red Skull. He goes to the firing range. He fires his gun. He throws some knives. But he's just talking about how his foes allow themselves all manner of pleasures, introspection, morality, the company of women. Oh my God.
And he's self-reflective. He says, "My enemies will not say, 'Ach, the Red Skull is feeling poorly today. Let us not bother him.' Or, 'Poor Skull, he's getting old. Let him succeed this time.'"
And then his lackey says, "The world is hard, Herr Skull." And then the Skull is doing his, and I love this between Dietrich, his lackey, says, just questioning him about the Hate Monger, because the Skull is talking about his success.
Right.
And the Skull says, "Oh, the Hate Monger, you recall how I tend to be with allies." And I was just like, allies are useful until they want what I want.
And these two issues are disturbing for a number of reasons, but even more disturbing than that introductory splash page is a panel that I'm going to capture for our YouTube channel. And the Hate Monger arrives after the Skull's workout, and he says, "You smell like a stable." And the Red Skull says, "It is the virile scent of Aryan sweat, my friend. Let fops and dandies bridle at the smell of a true man." And the Hate Monger says, "You are a Nazi, Herr Skull."
Well, and I was reading that, and I thought to myself, now I understand. When I go to comic conventions, I can smell the Nazis in the room. I can smell the comic skaters in the room.
That's not Nazis. That's the virile scent of Aryan sweat.
My mistake. My mistake.
So they go out to watch.
Brian, behold the field where I grow my fucks and see that it is barren. Anyway.
They go outside to watch some Nazis march around, and they're doing the Nazi goose step and singing "Sig Heil, Sig Heil." And we then transition to another wing of and we should mention this whole thing is taking place on a Caribbean island.
Yeah.
In another wing of the mansion on this island, We meet this character, Hair Tall.
I just had the image. I have to interrupt you. I just had the image in my mind of the, we used to see ads all the time for Jamaica and other Caribbean islands on TV. And I just have what would the ad be, the TV commercial for tourism to come visit the Nazi island in the Caribbean?
Well, it would have to include the virile scent of Aryan sweat.
Oh my God! Clearly there'd be a Trump golf course there.
Yeah. Now this character Yusef Tov, he's pretty important in these two issues. We've never talked about him on this show because he hasn't come up in any of the comics that we've covered so far. But he's a Marvel character. He's a Nazi hunter. He's a member of Israel's Shin Bet commando force. Before this appearance, he was last seen in Captain America's issues 104 and 105, in which the Red Skull planted a neuro detonator in his neck. So he's kind of a prisoner here of the Skulls, but he's not in chains. He's not in bars. He's allowed his run of the mansion. He's sitting there eating a meal. He basically he questions this. He says, why do all the other prisoners here starve while I am given luxury? I demand to know why.
Yeah. Well, we should also point out that the other people who are captives on the island, see him, the other members of Shin Bet that were captured, including, Tov's, romantic interest, I guess, Rachel.
Yes. Yes. She's also from Captain America.
Proves herself to be a much more capable agent than he is. They see him walking around and don't know that he's got this explosive charge in him. And they think he's a willing collaborator with the Skull and the Hate Monger. So that we should make note of that.
Right. So his minder, aka his guard, takes him to see the Skull. And he demands the Skull. He's like, this game has gone far enough. And the Skull says, you are not here to be tempted or broken, Israeli. And the game, as you put it, has only now begun.
Yeah. I want to point out two things here. One, a fun one, which is that the Skull snaps his fingers and a hole opens in the grassy knoll, little hillside here, that makes me think of Winnie the Pooh for some reason. So I hope you'll share that image.
I will.
I feel like it should have Winnie the Pooh's ass sticking out of it. And that's a lighter note. On the darker side, the Peter Gillis script here, even though we're dealing with the Marvel Universe and even though we're dealing with quote unquote supervillains, we get into a real darkness. I mean, this is, even though it's a supervillain plot, it's real world grim in the sense of the Skull and the Hate Monger continually use Jew as a
slur.
A slur, yeah, as a slur. Even though the word itself, of course, is not a slur, but the way that they use it is definitely meant to be full of disdain and hate. And same with Israeli. I mean, it's just the way that it's written. You can read it in, and also, interestingly enough, you will see the swastika, the flag of Nazi Germany, shown in great prominence in these two issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway,
so the Skull reveals his master plan. He's built a cyclotron beneath the island, and he's going to use it to create a second cosmic cube. For our Marvel Cinematic Universe listeners, he's going to create a brand new Tesseract.
There you go.
And Tov fits in because he is a spy. He's a commando. The Skull intends to have him spy on AIM and SHIELD and other places and get him the rest of the information he needs to build this cosmic cube. But
We
then,
should say that the Skull had previously twice had his hands on the Cosmic Cube and fucked it up.
yes,
And we'll get details on that a little later.
we will. But he has another offer for Tov.
Yep.
He says, the Cosmic Cube can only be wielded by one. Thus, my alliance with the Hate Monger is of necessity limited. When the time comes, I would like you to be my hidden trump card. In return, I will leave you your mind. So he basically wants Tov to kill the Hate Monger.
Right. Exactly. And Tov says he'll gladly kill him. But I'll see you in hell. And to remind him that the Skull has power over him, the Skull presses a plunger on a handheld device that causes that implant to cause Tov unimaginable pain.
Right.
We turn the page, Brian, and we get our first hint. The Hate Monger has his back turned to us, but his hood is off. And we see that he has a very blonde, very Aryan model posing for him as he paints a portrait of that model. And then we get a confrontation between the Skull and the Hate Monger, still without seeing the Hate Monger's face. And we get our flashback. I know you love these bits of continuity, Brian.
Yeah, we do. So last week's issue, we left the Red Skull on the moon. Dr. Doom had left him there to die. Well, it turns out the Hate Monger sent a moon probe up there and rescued him. Then, in one of my favorite runs on Captain America ever, Jack Kirby's return to the book, the Mad Bomb Saga, and then the Red Skull storyline that followed after, the Hate Monger points out that he introduced the Red Skull to Arnim Zola, another Nazi who's still alive in 1970s Marvel.
Right. And another character that you will be familiar with if you have watched the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
That's right. So, yeah, we basically find out that this story is taking place. He was rescued from the moon, but this story that we're reading now is taking place after Captain America 227 and 228, which is another great storyline where the Red Skull turns all of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents into Red Skulls.
Because why not?
Yeah. It is then that the Hate Monger's true identity is revealed. And Chris, I'll let you do that.
So, just in case you're still not sure about whose side you should be on when hate is involved, the Hate Monger's identity is revealed, and he is Adolf Hitler.
That's right.
Now, for those of you who didn't see that coming, this supervillain team-up story is the Red Skull and Adolf Hitler.
That's right. Bronze Age Marvel, ladies and gentlemen. Bronze Age Marvel.
Now, we'll explain later, we might as well say it now, that this is actually Hitler, that in the Marvel universe, comics universe, that when Hitler was hiding in his bunker at the end of World War II, he was found and killed by the original Human Torch, Jim Hammond, and his sidekick Toro, who was also a Human Torch. But in the moment before his death, his consciousness was like offloaded and later downloaded into a whole series of clone bodies. So his body is a clone, but this is the consciousness of the one and only King fucking Nazi, Adolf Hitler. And so you're absolutely right, folks. Comics were not political in the old days.
Never, ever, 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 ever. So we then transition to the guest wing, where Tov is reading a magazine, and suddenly he reacts to the detonator in his neck. He screams, "The pain! I've done nothing wrong! Stop!" And he falls to the floor. And his guard is very confused and very worried because he has not pressed the detonator.
It must be malfunctioning, Brian.
Yeah, and he tells him, "Courage, Herr Tov. I will neutralize the implant. You shall not die by accident." But it turns out Tov was pretending.
He was making believe.
He was.
So he takes out his guard, and then he kicks the shit out of some Nazis. He grabs a machine gun and murders some Nazis. And after seeing the face of Adolf Hitler in a Marvel comic book, there's nothing I want to see have a real palate cleanser of seeing Tov murder a bunch of Nazis.
And I don't know that Tov is used in modern day Marvel, and that's a shame because this sequence is badass.
Yes.
He kicks the door down. He grabs a gun from one of the Nazis. The Nazis are like, "Stop him! The Jew must not escape alive." And he says,
I think actually that those guys are comic skaters, but go ahead.
Okay. He says, "Oh, but the Jew will escape, Nazi butchers. The trouble is, you're not used to fighting mere men rather than superheroes." He just whips Nazi ass. Mm-hmm. And I want a comic book with, I don't know, him and Dominic Fortune just beating up Nazis.
Well, I very much like Rachel as well, also a member of Shin Bet. And so when he goes to free the people who think he's a collaborator, they initially don't believe him, and he tries to lead them to freedom, and he runs across the property and he is shot. And Rachel runs out to his aid, and she begins, unarmed battle with a whole bunch of armed Nazis, which prompts the rest of the prisoners to come out and start fighting. Tov is only wounded, and even though he's shot in the left shoulder, Brian, he's able to deck a Nazi with a left-handed punch moments later.
Yeah, and he gets to the docks. He steals a boat, and he escapes the island.
He escapes the island. He reaches a boat that flies the American flag. It's a Navy vessel, but unfortunately, Brian, it isn't a Navy vessel because on board are the Red Skull and the Hate Monger. The people who'd risen up have been recaptured, and there you go.
Yep. They take him back to the island. When he gets there, he sees Rachel and everybody else back in captivity, back in their cells. And then
we're on to the last issue of Supervillain Team Up. And I like the fact that underneath it says, starring the Hate Monger and the Red Skull, also featuring the bizarre menace of Arnim Zola.
Yep. Now, I can remember getting this one as a kid. I had missed the previous issue. But as much as I love the Headman and the Elf with a Gun from Defenders, I am an Arnim Zola freak. I don't love that he's a Nazi, but I love everything about the character. I love the visual aesthetic that Jack Kirby came up with. I love his abilities.
So Arnim Zola, folks, is essentially it's an android. It's a headless android body with a big screen in the middle of his chest, which shows the face of the physically dead Arnim Zola. Yeah.
And he's a master biogenicist. He basically creates monsters. He's a Frankenstein. I think the only Marvel villain that might be more bizarre looking is MODOK, but I think they're very tied. But yeah, I am all about Arnim Zola, and we open up.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I was saying we do get a panel of Arnim Zola here. Issue 17 is written again by Peter Gillis. The art is by Arvell Jones and Bruce Patterson. I'm not familiar with Arvell Jones, and now I'm curious. I'd like to look him up. I will say that we introduce an AIM scientist an AIM scientist who is black, whose name is George Clinton. And that can't be an accident. And if you don't know who George Clinton is, Google him. But I love that George Clinton is an AIM scientist.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Arvell Jones, he should be better known. He should definitely be better known. He was he's still alive. He's an African American comics artist. He did a lot of stuff for Milestone. His run on All-Star Squadron over at DC is probably what he's best known for. I knew him because, as listeners to the show know, I'm a big Rich Buckler fan.
Right.
And he with Buckler, he created Deathlock, somebody who we're going to get to eventually on this series.
Wait, Arvell Jones was the co-creator of Deathlock?
Yep, co-created. Buckler created. Buckler, I guess, gets the credit for creating Deathlock. Yeah. Arvell Jones came up with the designs and stuff like that.
Cool.
He did a lot of stuff with Buckler back in the day.
Well, this is why I need to reread Deathlock.
You may be interested in knowing he co-created with Tony Isabella Misty Knight from Power Man and Iron Fist.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I agree. He's someone we don't hear enough about. His work was limited. Like I said, All-Star Squadron, he had a very long run on that. Astonishing Tales 30 with Deathlock. He did some Marvel 2-in-1s, some Marvel Spotlights here and there. Doesn't get the credit he deserves, though.
Cool. Yeah. Well, and again, so he was very early on the scene. This is 1970s, or early 70s.
Yeah.
This is mid 70s, but still.
Well, this issue's late.
Oh, that's right. This issue's in the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. This issue actually came out June of 1980. At that point, Supervillain Team Up, it was supposed to be bi-monthly and they couldn't get it on schedule. Yeah. Which is why I suspect this was the last issue.
Yeah. So Dr. Clinton of AIM has arrived. He's a founding member of AIM. And basically, they're the Red Skull and the Hate Monger, a.k.a. Adolf Hitler, are offering their hospitality. They take Dr. Clinton down through the Winnie the Pooh hole. And they reveal to him that the plan is to create a second cosmic cube. And then the Hate Monger begins to have a little flashback, Brian. A flashback that includes your and Tom Snagowski's favorite villain.
That's right. MODOK, mental organism designed only for killing. MODOK created the first cosmic cube. We get the whole continuity flashback, how the Skull gained control of it, how later Thanos gained control of it. And of course, our Marvel Cinematic Universe listeners will know what happens when Thanos gets the Tesseract. Mm-hmm. And then we get something that we've talked about on the show before. We've seen it during J.M. DeMatteis's run on the Defenders. And we find out what the Skull is doing with these prisoners. To build this second cube, rather than risk creating another MODOK, they're using normal human brains hooked into their computer. And Dr. Clinton says, but the informational load will fry their brains. They'll burn out. The Red Skull says, well, that's okay. We've got plenty of replacement parts.
It's like Doritos.
Yeah.
Crunch all you want. We'll make more. And that is the Skull's attitude toward their prisoners.
Right. Who are Jewish, ladies and gentlemen. This is just a not a modern day, but a 1970s concentration camp.
Yeah. And just in case you weren't sure, there are swastika armbands on the guards who are dragging the prisoners out to put them into this mind-rending machine of trying to create the new cosmic cube.
Right.
Now we see Rachel. Tov is having a flashback about Rachel and how he fell for her with her fiery leadership about how they need to move against the Hate Monger and the Skull. And she's with S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah. But see, it's weird because in first reading through this, I thought it was a flashback too, but it's not. The transition doesn't make it clear, but it's happening in real time. Yusef has now been thrown in the pens. He's no longer imprisoned in luxury. And what we're going to find out here in a moment is that Rachel has escaped.
Okay. I thought it looked like, but that makes way more sense now. It looked like that was a flashback because you see him with her, and then she's looking at a photo. Yeah, it's confusing for sure.
Yeah. So she's at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. We see our old pal Gabe Jones, who we remember from our coverage of Marvel's Godzilla.
Oh, that's right. And then we have,
he's one of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents there. And she tells them about the island. She tells them about, Yusef being recaptured and how they decided to punish Rachel. But that weeks later, they basically punished her by carving a swastika into her face.
No, they carved the SS symbol.
Or excuse me, the SS.
Into her cheek. And then this is my favorite moment probably in the entire run of Supervillain Team Up. Rachel says, weeks later, after they torture her like this, and there's an image of this, Brian, and I know you'll share it.
Yes, I will.
I managed to garrote a guard with a rope made from my own hair and spittle. So she used her own hair and spit to create a rope strong enough to strangle this Nazi to death.
Yes. So, she's telling S.H.I.E.L.D., look, I don't know what the Skull and the Hate Monger are up to, but we've got to stop their plans without delay. We must act now. And we find out that the Hate Monger is using the prisoners, not just to build a new cosmic cube, but as we saw in the Defenders, he's using them with a telepathic link to Rachel. So he's spying on her from the island, and he knows that she's now gone to S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah. There you go. So we know that we have Zola. Dr. Clinton is just now volunteering his information. How is he volunteering that, Brian? Well, he's being treated the way that they would treat anybody, but especially someone who is not an Aryan.
Yep.
He's strapped to a chair, screaming as the information is drawn out of his brain.
Yep.
And basically, they've created the outer shell of the cube. It is now the perfect prison. Within that matrix shall be captured the mysterious omnidimensional X element, which is the essence of the cosmic cube. I'm surprised there wasn't a series in the 90s called X Element. That's one they managed to miss. And they're only a few hours away. And then the Skull is greedily, like Daffy Duck, saying, I'm rich, I'm fabulously well off. A cosmic cube with the power to turn any wish into reality. Think of it. The ultimate power, and it's now within, and then he glances over at the Hate Monger, our grasp. And then go ahead, Brian. I know you want to talk about that last panel on that page.
Yeah, the undertones there are quite something, aren't they? You see Hitler and the Skull looking into each other's eyes. And the caption tells us they stare across the gulf of their own ambitions, these two master villains. They know that soon their alliance will end, for the cosmic cube can only be wielded by one hand.
Exactly. So even though they're allies, and we find this in the entire run of Supervillain Team Up, right? That every single Supervillain Team Up ends the same way that Tale of the Frog and the Scorpion end, which is, you knew I was a scorpion when you agreed to carry me on your back. You knew you were going to get stung. So you have, go ahead.
So we transition to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s air base, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Bill, he's trying to get word from the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and he tells her, look, we can't just go off half cocked. This is the Red Skull we're talking about. And Rachel pleads with him, and he hugs her for comfort, and when he does, he feels through her jumpsuit that her back is a mass of welts and scar tissue, and that convinces him. He says, "Attention all units, scramble, we're going now."
And again, not to be political in comics, but the caption reads, "William Collins remembers the facts of Buchenwald and Auschwitz." There you go. So again, folks, continue, Brian.
Yeah.
And by the way, if I sound at any point in conversation about these topics amused, it's an amusement of disbelief and horror. And in truth, also mockery of anyone who believes that comics don't have politics don't have a place in comics, and also, by the way, that the morality that these stories present is not political. So go ahead.
No, it's not, and in a way, we see that with the next transition. We see the Skull in his private room, and he's dejected. He's demoralized. He has to turn on Adolf Hitler. But he says, "But I do not wish it. We share the same ideals, the same dream. Why can we not share the triumph? Why must I contend against you, whom I would not fight?" He says, I was the only one who believed in your dream strongly enough to make it real. I mean, his dream is talking about, the extermination of the Jewish race and, anyone who's not an Aryan.
Yeah.
But the way Peter Gillis writes this, props to him. He does inject something more than cartoonish supervillainy into the Red Skull here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also I will say that Arvell Jones's art I like in most of this issue, and except that in that particular panel, the Skull's head looks like the head of a penis.
Well, so that might have been done on purpose.
So if you want to say the Skull is a dickhead, you wouldn't be wrong. Yeah. Tangent sidebar. Anybody of our age group who has watched Star Trek Discovery will be as sad as I was to see that the aliens we knew as the Keepers, I can't remember what their actual name is, from the original series. Ironically, my brother and I were little kids when that was on reruns growing up. And we had an action figure of that alien, and we used to call those guys the bumheads.
Right.
Because from the back, their heads look like butts.
Right.
And so, of course, we called them the bumheads. And if I said to my brother, "Hey, we remember that episode with the bumheads? It didn't even mention Star Trek," he would know exactly what I meant. And I was so sad on Star Trek Discovery that when those aliens show up, the makers of the show are at great pains to never, I'm not joking, to never show those aliens from behind. In all of season 2, you see them in like 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And they never show one of them from behind.
Really? See, I haven't watched it yet. So
it's really good, by the way. But, and I'm not a big Star Trek fan in general. I mean, I like it, but I like the original series and the movies more than I like the other series.
Right.
So yes, the dickhead Red Skull image reminded me of the bumheads, but tangent over, back to the show.
Oh man. So yeah, Shield attacks the base. What I find curious here, I mean, there's all kinds of neat stuff. The base has 2 giant adamantium hemispheres, which quickly rise up and snap shut. But what else I find interesting, Shield are actually using captured Hydra weapons.
Yep. Yeah, and they're able to, and I love it because it's like, hey, look, we've got the hardest metal on Earth. More adamantium than's probably ever been in one place at one time to create this hemisphere that will protect our entire base Oh, but S.H.I.E.L.D. is using this captured Hydra weapon that just obliterates it in 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the gun battle breaks out between the Nazis on one side, along with the Red Skull, and Rachel and the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on the other side. But what, pray tell, are Adolf Hitler and Arnim Zola up to while all this is going on?
Well, of course, they used the distraction, Brian.
That's right.
I just heard a cat.
Yeah, that's Mary Sangiovanni's cat. That meow translates into always punch Nazis, I believe. He wanted to.
That's my kind of cat.
So, and now Mary's entering the studio. So come here. Come be on the air with us.
Hello.
So I'm assuming you're sitting in your office eavesdropping.
As I do.
Are you surprised that Marvel would have Adolf Hitler as one of the starring bad guys in a 1970s comic book?
I'm not, but I still can't get over the virile sweat.
The virile Aryan sweat. You're still stuck on that?
Sweat smells like horse poop.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, though, Mary, that if you replace the word Aryan with the word hillbilly, you may be familiar with that statement. I don't know.
Hey, now that's offensive. That's offensive, Chris.
Well, you are a self-proclaimed hillbilly, Brian.
I can't speak for the rest of Pennsylvania.
Yes, I'm a self-professed hillbilly, but I don't smell like a horse.
Oh, okay. All right.
Do you guys do like a best of Defenders dialogue quotes?
We should now.
That should be on it.
All right, take your cat. We're talking comic books.
All right. Well, folks, then we get the whole flashback about how Adolf Hitler became the hate monger, which we've just described to you. And that was all done with the help of Arnim Zola. That's right.
And, Arnim designed him a new body. We see some of those bodies that have shown up in Marvel Comics before. They're, as we said, Arnim Zola, he's a bio engineer. And Hitler says Adolf Hitler has died and lived many times. Like the ancient gods, I took on human guise when it pleased me.
There you go. And again, a lot of tangents today, but if you haven't seen the classic Twilight Zone episode starring Dennis Hopper called He's Alive, you should definitely take this opportunity to go and watch it. It features Dennis Hopper as the leader of a white supremacist organization in the 60s who is being coached by the ghost of Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
In any case, Hitler reveals his plan to Arnim Zola.
Yeah, can I reveal what Hitler's master plan is?
Yeah, sure. By all means.
He doesn't want to control the cosmic cube. He wants to become the cosmic cube itself. And he tells Zola he wants him to use the mind transference techniques and send his brain, his mind, into the cube's matrix.
There you go. Which seems like it could be a deadly plan. It could legitimately turn him into a god who would have the power to do anything with reality. And then, Rachel of Shin Bet, joined with S.H.I.E.L.D. Rachel breaks into the chamber where the Skull is working with his, the people who are linked together to try to create the cosmic cube. She shoots the Skull, and other people are shooting the hate monger. And it appears that they're being shot and killed over and over and over again. Rachel, is able to release Yusef Tov from this machine, but he seems to have his mind destroyed.
That's right. And we find out that all those skulls and hate mongers that were shot, they were decoys.
Yes.
S.H.I.E.L.D. blows up the entire island. Just fuck it. Burn it all down. And then we discover that the real Red Skull was alive far, far below the surface. And
alive with a cosmic cube in his hand, Brian.
That's right.
And then we find that the Skull has outsmarted Hitler. And this is always the thing, Brian. You can always count on being stabbed in the back when you're working with a supervillain. And the question is, like, how will this all happen? When the scorpion stings you, and you are also a scorpion, and we're planning to sting them all along, it's not going to end well.
Right.
In this case, the Skull is defeated, and all he has to show for his troubles is this tiny little cosmic cube that is not a cosmic cube, Brian.
No, it turns out it wasn't a cosmic cube at all. It was a prison that the Skull and Arnim Zola designed, and now Adolf Hitler's mind rests inside this paperweight.
There you go. And Peter Gillis's final word balloon in his 2 issues on Supervillain Team Up is the Red Skull, of all people, saying sometimes we must leave the past behind us.
That's right.
And there you go. That doesn't mean, by the way, that that the Red Skull thinks that that Hitler's bad. Only that he didn't want to have to compete with Hitler.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And there you have it, folks. That is the end of Marvel's Supervillain Team Up. Marvel did bring the series back years later. It was called Supervillain Team Up Modoc's 11. It was a take on Ocean's 11. It is a fun comic to read. We're not going to cover it here on the show because it's not Bronze Age, and we like to stick to the Bronze Age on this show. But I do encourage you to check it out and read it if you get a chance. Next week, Steve Gerber returns to the show. Well, he doesn't return to the show, but our geeking out over Steve Gerber returns to the show as we examine what I think is his second best work ever in comics. And that is his very long run on Marvel's character of the Man-Thing.
I had a really fun conversation with my nephew, Jack, who is, I think he just wrapped the 7th grade.
Yeah.
We were social distancing in my mother's yard a couple weeks ago, trying to just like visit family,
right,
in a safe way. And I was wearing my Man-Thing T-shirt, which I will undoubtedly wear next week when we record this show. And I said, Jack, in the 1970s, Marvel published a comic called Giant Size Man-Thing. And Jack did not need the subtext of that explained to him. He started laughing and rolling his eyes and shaking his head. And my 84-year-old mother was like, Jack, you understood that? You got that? And Jack just like shook his head. It was pretty damn funny. But yeah, and again, I have not. First of all, I'm sure that some people are very happy that we're moving on to Man-Thing and stop talking about Nazis for a week. But also, I have not read hardly any of the comics we'll be covering for the next who knows how many weeks.
Well, that's excellent then. In rereading them, for those people who are happy that we're no longer talking about Nazis, if you think we're not going to talk about politics and
oh yeah, well, it's Gerber.
Yeah, you're wrong. Obviously we got into a lot of that when we covered Gerber's run on the Defenders, but Man-Thing in particular is where he really cut loose on those sort of subjects. So yeah, buckle up. Since we ended Defenders, this is the one I've been looking forward to the most. Champions was fun. Black Goliath was fun. Gargoyle was fun. Godzilla and Supervillain Team Up were fun, but this is going to be some meat starting next week.
Good. Well, and I will say, for those who are interested in reading along, I'll be using the first 2 volumes of the complete Steve Gerber Man-Thing. And then I've got the essential black and white essential Man-Thing volume 2 to fill in the issues that I'll have been missing at that time. But there is,
I will be reading the original floppy comic books from
awesome. So hopefully you can tell us about some of the ads in those comics, and yeah,
exactly.
letters page stuff. I love that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, all right, Chris.
Awesome.
You got anything to say?
You know what, Brian? Only Excelsior True Believers and Punch Nazis.
All right. We'll see you next week, folks.
Defenders Dialogue is a production of the Brian Keene Radio Network. You can listen to this episode and all previous episodes for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Music, and wherever else podcasts are available. Defenders Dialogue is written and produced by Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Our theme music is by Xander Harris. Our engineer is Matt Wilderson. Check out his books on Amazon.com. If you enjoyed this show, you might enjoy our other podcasts, The Horror Show with Brian Keene, Cosmic Shenanigans, and Grindcast. To advertise on Defenders Dialogue, visit briankeene.com and click Podcasts.